Millionaire agreed to marry an ugly bride in arranged marriage, stunned when she removed her veil. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain streaked the windows of the luxury hotel suite as Adrian Cole sat at the edge of a mahogany desk, his jaw tight, his hand clutching a photograph. The picture showed a young woman, her face awkwardly framed, glasses too large, her expression plain, almost lifeless. Beside the photo lay a sealed envelope, embossed with his family crest. Inside, one ultimatum. Marry her, his uncle had said, or the board will strip you of the company your father built. Adrian's laugh was hollow, bitter. Ugly bride? Fine. If this is what it takes to keep the empire intact, I will sign the deal. Marriage is a contract, nothing more. His reflection in the glass was sharp, unyielding, but beneath it simmered exhaustion. He was only 32, yet the burden of generations weighed like chains. Across town, the woman in the photograph sat quietly in a modest library, her fingers brushing the edge of a worn notebook. Her name was Eliza Warren. The world knew nothing about her except for that unflattering image, circulated deliberately to make her appear less than she was. She had agreed to this arranged marriage, not for wealth, but because her own family debts had backed her into a corner. What Adrian did not know was that Eliza carried a strength that no photograph could capture. 2 weeks later, the grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the air humming with gossip and perfume. Guests whispered behind jeweled masks, curious about the strange union. The groom, tall, composed, dressed in a tailored black suit, stood with an expression carved from stone. The bride entered, her face veiled, her frame delicate under a gown of ivory silk. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but no one saw beneath the veil. The officiant's voice carried through the silence. Do you, Adrian Cole, take this woman? I do. His words were clipped, almost mechanical. And do you, Eliza Warren, take this man? Her voice was soft, steady. I do. A simple ring slid onto her finger, the cold band, a symbol of a contract rather than love. Cameras flashed, journalists scribbled, investors exchanged glances. The marriage was sealed, not with passion, but with signatures on a hidden page. At the reception, whispers grew louder. He married for control. She must have begged for this. What a shame, such a powerful man tied down to that. Adrian lifted his glass, pretending not to hear. But when a reporter pressed forward and asked, Mr. Cole, was this marriage truly for love? He froze. Before he could answer, Eliza spoke through her veil, her tone clever, almost playful. He chose me because I know how to keep a secret better than he does. Laughter erupted across the room, easing the tension, disarming the crowd. For the first time that night, Adrian's gaze flicked toward her with something other than indifference. She had saved him, with wit no contract could predict. Later, under the quiet of a balcony washed in moonlight, he found her standing alone, veil still covering her face. You surprised me tonight, he admitted. Her reply was gentle, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. Sometimes you do not need to see a face to recognize a heart. Adrian stood in silence, for once without a retort. Something shifted in the air between them, something the contract had never accounted for. The night after the wedding, the grand estate felt more like a museum than a home. The ceilings soared high, the marble floors echoed each step, and the silence was heavy, broken only by the ticking of a clock somewhere deep in the halls. Adrian walked beside Eliza, his stride confident, his expression unreadable. She followed quietly, veil still drawn, carrying herself with calm composure that unnerved him more than any argument could. The housekeeper led them to their separate rooms. Adrian paused at his door, glancing once at her before speaking in a clipped tone. You will be comfortable here. Dinner is served at 7. Beyond that, our paths do not have to cross unless required. Eliza inclined her head, the veil hiding her face but not the firmness in her voice. I understand. This marriage is not about love, and I have no desire to make it more than it island. His jaw tightened. He had expected her to plead, to show weakness, but instead, she matched his coldness with her own steel. Without another word, he entered his room and shut the door. The next morning, Adrian returned to his office in the city. Towering glass windows framed the skyline, but his mind was not on quarterly reports or board meetings. His assistant, Claire, noticed his distraction. "You have been on edge since last night," she remarked. "Is it the merger?" Adrian shook his head. "No, it is something else." But he offered no explanation. Even he could not understand why his thoughts lingered on the woman behind the veil, on her quick wit at the reception, on the calm way she carried herself despite the ridicule. Meanwhile, Eliza explored the mansion's endless corridors. She paused in the library, where shelves of leather-bound books stretched to the ceiling. The room smelled faintly of oak and dust. She traced her fingers along the spines, then settled into a chair with her notebook. She wrote quietly, her pen moving steadily, capturing thoughts she could not voice aloud. At dinner, they sat at opposite ends of a table long enough to seat 20. Silver candelabras glowed, polished plates gleamed, but the silence between them was louder than any clatter of cutlery. Halfway through the meal, Adrian spoke, his voice carrying across the vast space. "You handled the press well yesterday." Eliza looked up, her veil still in place. "You expected me to fail." His eyes narrowed. Most people would have stumbled. Her reply was calm, with a trace of defiance. "Most people are not me." For the first time, Adrian felt a flicker of curiosity, something that unsettled him. He had agreed to this marriage as a transaction, a means to an end. Yet every word she spoke chipped away at the image painted by that photograph. Later that night, Eliza stood on the balcony again, the veil stirring in the breeze. The city lights shimmered in the distance. She whispered to herself, "I will not be defined by their lies." Unbeknownst to her, Adrian stood in the shadows of the hall, watching. He could not see her face, but something in her posture, in the quiet strength she carried, struck him deeply. For a man who thought he had already mapped out every part of his future, Adrian Cole felt a shift he could not control. Across the estate, rumors were already brewing. The board members whispered about the mysterious bride, and Adrian's uncle sharpened his schemes, waiting for the perfect moment to expose the marriage as a fraud. The storm had only just begun. Days passed, and the strange rhythm of their arrangement began to take shape. Adrian buried himself in work, returning late from the office, his demeanor always composed but distant. Eliza remained a mystery within the mansion, her veil never lifted, her voice calm and measured whenever they exchanged brief words. One evening, a formal gala demanded their appearance as a couple. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and orchestral music, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Everyone wanted to see the elusive bride. Adrian arrived in a tailored black tuxedo, every step purposeful, every glance sharp. At his side, Eliza glided with quiet elegance, her ivory gown flowing behind her, her face still hidden by the delicate veil. The whispers began immediately. "Why will she not show her face?" "Perhaps the rumors are true. She is too ashamed." The murmurs grew louder until Adrian's uncle, seated near the front, seized the opportunity. He rose with a glass in his hand, his smile sly, his voice booming above the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "it is a joyous occasion to celebrate my nephew's marriage. Yet, it seems odd that we have not been properly introduced to his bride. Should a wife not show herself with pride?" The crowd turned expectant eyes toward the couple. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and the pressure in the room tightened like a vice. Adrian's chest clenched with fury. He knew this was his uncle's trap, a calculated move to humiliate Eliza and destabilize his control over the company. He stepped forward, his voice sharp. "This is unnecessary. My wife owes no one her face, nor her explanations." But before he could shield her further, Eliza lifted a hand gently, stopping him. Her voice was steady, echoing across the hall. "It is all right, Adrian. I am not afraid." With graceful composure, she reached up and drew the veil away. Gasps erupted through the room. Beneath the silk covering was not the plain, awkward woman from the photograph. Instead, her features were striking clear, eyes framed by dark lashes, cheekbones refined, lips curved with quiet confidence. The hall fell into stunned silence. Adrian froze. The image his uncle had shown him, The photo that had convinced him she was unattractive was a fabrication. The truth stood before him now. Eliza Warren was beautiful, dignified, and far stronger than he had imagined. His uncle's smile faltered. "Impossible," he muttered, his hand tightening around the stem of his glass. The trap had turned back on him. Reporters swarmed, voices rising with questions. "Mrs. Cole, why did you hide? Was this deception?" Eliza met the frenzy with calm. "A veil does not hide the truth. It only reveals who has patience to see beyond appearances. I did not owe anyone proof of my worth, but tonight you will see that worth in my actions, not in a photograph." The applause began slowly, scattered, but soon grew stronger. Guests nodded, impressed by her poise. The tension broke into murmurs of admiration. Adrian stood rooted, his eyes fixed on her. In that instant, for the first time, he felt something crack through his carefully built walls of indifference. Later, as the gala wound down, he found her standing alone near the exit. Moonlight spilled through the tall windows, casting her in a glow that seemed almost unreal. "Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice low. She turned, her veil folded neatly in her hands. "Because I refused to let lies define me, and because you needed to know the truth as much as they did." Adrian's throat tightened. He had married her for control, for obligation. Yet now he was the one who felt unsteady. The game his uncle had tried to play had failed, but what unsettled him more was the realization forming in his chest. He no longer saw her as a contract. The storm with his uncle was far from over, but something had shifted irrevocably. For the first time, Adrian Cole began to wonder if this marriage could become something real. The night of the gala lingered in Adrian's mind, long after the last guest had left. He replayed the moment Eliza lifted her veil, the way the room gasped, the strength in her voice as she silenced every whisper. She had not only defended herself, she had defended him too. For the first time in years, Adrian felt the edges of his certainty blur. The following morning, breakfast was served in the sunlit dining room. Adrian entered expecting silence, but Eliza was already seated, her hair uncovered, her face fully visible for the first time in private. She sipped her tea calmly, her posture poised. Adrian paused in the doorway, caught off guard by her quiet confidence. "You are not wearing the veil," he remarked. She looked up, her eyes steady. "Why should I? The world has already seen my face. Let them talk. I no longer care." Adrian sat across from her, studying her in the morning light. She was not the timid girl the rumors had painted her to be. She was composed, thoughtful, and entirely unafraid. "You handled them well," he admitted. A small smile curved her lips. "You sound surprised." "I am," he confessed, almost against his will. "I thought you would crumble under pressure. Instead, you turned the moment into victory." For the first time, their conversation was not barbed with coldness. It was a bridge, fragile but real. That week, Adrian found himself drawn into her presence more often. He discovered her in the library surrounded by books, writing in her notebook with quiet focus. He caught her in the gardens, speaking gently to the staff, thanking them for their work, something he himself rarely did. She carried herself with dignity, but also with kindness, a quality that unsettled him. One evening, as rain tapped against the tall windows, Adrian found her in the music room. She was seated at the piano, her fingers moving slowly across the keys, hesitant but graceful. He stood in the doorway, listening to the soft melody fill the empty halls. "You play," he said quietly. Eliza glanced up. "Not well, but it calms me." Adrian stepped closer, his voice lower. "It sounds better than silence." The words slipped out before he could catch them. For a man who thrived on control, the admission startled him. Eliza said nothing, but her eyes softened, and the music continued. Meanwhile, outside their growing connection, Adrian's uncle grew restless. The failed attempt at the gala had only fueled his resentment. In whispered meetings behind closed doors, he rallied board members, warning them that Adrian's marriage was a facade, a desperate play to secure power. He promised them proof, something that would bring Adrian down for good. At the mansion, tension mounted in subtle ways. Anonymous letters arrived, hinting at scandals. Reporters lingered outside the gates, hungry for a crack in the story. Adrian dismissed them in public, but behind closed doors, He knew his uncle was moving pieces on the board. Late one night, Eliza found him pacing his study, documents scattered across the desk. His tie was loosened, his hair unruly, his face etched with strain. "You are fighting a war," she said softly. He looked up, startled by her presence. "It is nothing you need to concern yourself with." She stepped closer, her voice firm. "If I am your wife, even by contract, then it concerns me. You do not have to carry everything alone." Her words struck deeper than she realized. No one had ever offered him that kind of partnership before, not as leverage, not as ambition, but as genuine support. For a moment, Adrian saw her not as a stranger, not as a contractual bride, but as someone who could stand beside him in truth. Yet before he could speak, a sharp knock rattled the door. His assistant, Claire, entered, her expression grave. "Mr. Cole, there has been a leak. Tomorrow's paper will run a headline questioning the legitimacy of your marriage." Adrian's jaw clenched, his uncle's shadow clear behind the attack. Eliza placed her hand lightly on the desk, her voice steady. "Then tomorrow, we face them together." Adrian met her eyes, and for the first time, he believed she meant it. Something in his chest shifted again, and he knew the storm was coming. But he was no longer certain he would have to weather it alone. The next morning arrived heavy with tension. As promised, the papers carried bold headlines. "Marriage of convenience? Cole heir tied to questionable bride." The photograph chosen was calculated to wound an old, grainy image of Eliza that bore little resemblance to the woman she truly was. The whispers that had been quiet after the gala roared back to life with sharpened teeth. Adrian sat in his office with the newspaper spread across his desk, his fingers pressed to his temples. Claire hovered nearby, cautious. "The board is restless. Your uncle is calling an emergency session tomorrow. He will push to revoke your authority." Adrian's jaw tightened. He has been waiting for this moment. Before Claire could reply, the door opened. Eliza stepped inside, holding a copy of the same paper. Her calm composure unsettled the room. She placed it gently on the desk. "So, this is their next move." Adrian looked at her, anger still burning. "They are using you as a weapon against me. They want you humiliated so that I will crumble." Eliza's voice was steady. "Then we will not let them. If they want a spectacle, we give them something they cannot twist." That evening, back at the mansion, Eliza proposed something bold. "Invite the press here, Adrian. Not to attack us, but to witness us. Let them see the truth with their own eyes. If your uncle spreads lies, we must outshine them with what is real." "Oh," Adrian studied her, disbelief flickering across his face. "You would stand before them willingly after all this?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Because hiding gives him power, but standing in the open takes it away." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. The following day, the estate's ballroom was transformed into a press hall. Reporters filled the rows, cameras ready, their pens hungry for scandal. Adrian stood at the podium in a charcoal suit, his expression composed but fierce. At his side, Eliza walked gracefully. No veil, no disguise. Only truth. Flashes exploded as questions rained down. "Is your marriage a sham? Was she forced into this union? Are you protecting your company with a staged romance?" Adrian raised his hand, silencing the noise. His voice carried with authority. "This marriage began as an obligation. I will not deny it. But what you do not see in your headlines is the woman beside me. Eliza Warren has more courage than anyone in this room. She stood by me when others conspired to see me fail. She has endured lies, ridicule, and betrayal, and yet she remains unbroken. If you question my judgment, question me. But do not dare question her worth." The room stilled. Every word landed heavy, undeniable. Then Eliza stepped forward, her voice even but filled with quiet power. "Photographs do not tell the truth. Words twisted by those who fear change do not tell the truth. The truth is simple. I am here because I chose to be. I am here because I will not be defined by their schemes. Judge me as you wish, but know that my life is not a bargaining chip for power." There was silence, then murmurs of admiration. Some reporters lowered their pens, visibly shaken by her poise. Others scribbled furiously, realizing the story was no longer about scandal but about defiance and dignity. At the back of the room, Adrian's uncle stood stiff, his plans unraveling. His smug expression had vanished, replaced by fury. When the press conference ended, Adrian and Eliza retreated to the quiet of the study. For a moment, they stood in silence, the echoes of applause still lingering. Adrian turned to her, his voice rough. "You did not have to do that, but you did, and you did it flawlessly." Eliza looked at him steadily. "You forget, Adrian. This marriage may have started as a contract, but I have never been a pawn. I will fight for myself, and, if necessary, I will fight for you too." The words struck him harder than any headline. Something shifted again, deeper this time, beyond duty or necessity. For the first time since the arrangement began, Adrian wondered if what was growing between them was no longer bound by paper and signatures, but by choice. Outside, storm clouds gathered above the city, signaling the battles yet to come. But within the mansion walls, something fragile and undeniable had begun to take root. The storm that followed the press conference did not strike in headlines but behind the polished doors of the boardroom. The next day, Adrian walked into the marble chamber of Cole Enterprises. Every seat around the mahogany table filled with sharp-eyed directors. At the head sat his uncle, calm and smiling as if he already held victory. "Adrian," the older man began smoothly, "your marriage may have silenced the press for now, but the board requires certainty. We cannot allow personal distractions to endanger this company." Adrian's voice cut across the table, steady but cold. "The company is not endangered by my marriage. It is endangered by the rot within this room." His gaze locked on his uncle, and we both know where that rot begins. Gasps murmured through the directors, tension stretching like a drawn bowstring. Outside the boardroom, Eliza waited in the reception hall, her hands folded neatly, her presence calm but commanding. She had insisted on coming, not to interfere, but to stand with him. When Adrian emerged hours later, his expression was a mask of composure, yet his eyes revealed the weight of the battle. "They will not stop," he told her quietly as they walked through the marble lobby. "Then neither will we," Eliza replied. Her certainty steadied him in ways he had not expected. That evening, back at the mansion, the walls of distance between them began to crack. Adrian found her again in the library, this time without her notebook. She stood near the fireplace, the flames casting a warm glow across her features. "You have given more to this marriage than I ever expected," he said, his voice low. "You did not owe me loyalty, yet you have shown it." "Why?" Eliza turned, her eyes meeting his without hesitation. "Because loyalty is not about contracts, it is about choice. And because, Adrian, I see a man who has carried too much alone for too long." The words struck deep, pulling down defenses he had built for years. He stepped closer, almost despite himself. "And what do you see now?" Her voice softened. "I see a man learning that strength does not mean isolation." Silence lingered, heavy but not empty. For the first time, Adrian did not feel the need to fill it with control or authority. He simply stood there, breathing in the truth she offered. Days passed, and their routine shifted. Meals no longer stretched in silence. Conversations, once clipped and formal, grew easier. Adrian found himself watching for the curve of her smile, the quick wit in her remarks, the quiet kindness she extended even to the staff who had once treated her with suspicion. But shadows gathered. One late evening, a sealed envelope arrived at the mansion, slipped under the door. Inside was a set of photographs, grainy images of Adrian in meetings, papers exchanged, shadows of deals twisted to look like corruption. At the bottom, a single typed line. "Step down, or we release these to the public." Adrian's face hardened as he handed the envelope to Eliza. "He is trying to frame me. He will not stop until I am destroyed." Eliza scanned the photos, her brow furrowing. "These are doctored. Anyone with a careful eye could see it. But he counts on the world believing lies over truth." She looked at him firmly. "Then we cannot fight him with silence. We must bring the truth into the light." Adrian's shoulders tensed. He had fought battles in boardrooms, on trading floors, across hostile negotiations, but never had he faced an enemy who used his own family against him. Yet beside him stood Eliza, no longer a hidden bride, no longer a contract bound by signatures. She was becoming his ally, his partner. That night, as thunder rolled outside and rain hammered against the windows, Adrian stood at his office window, watching the storm rage. Eliza entered quietly, her presence soft but undeniable. Without words, she moved beside him, her shoulder brushing his arm. For once, Adrian did not move away. He let the silence hold them, the storm outside echoing the one closing in around their lives. And in that fragile moment, he understood that the woman he had once dismissed as an ugly bride was now the only person keeping him from falling apart. The storm was far from over, but something had changed forever. Adrian Cole no longer faced it alone. The following morning, the storm outside had cleared, but the storm inside Adrian's world only grew darker. The newspapers exploded with half-truths and accusations, each headline crafted to make him appear reckless, corrupt, and unfit to lead. His uncle's hand was evident in every word. At the mansion, Adrian stood in the study, the stack of papers spread before him. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists. He has turned the board against me. If this continues, they will strip me of everything my father built. Eliza entered quietly, carrying a folder. Then we must act before he does. She laid the folder on the desk. Inside were documents she had obtained, financial records, hidden transactions, and proof that Adrian's uncle had been embezzling funds for years. I asked the staff to trace his trail of dealings. He left fingerprints everywhere. If the board wants the truth, we will give it to them. Adrian stared at her, stunned. You did this? Eliza met his gaze firmly. I told you, I will not let lies define us. You may have thought this was only your fight, but it is mine now too. For the first time in weeks, Adrian felt something more powerful than anger. He felt hope. That afternoon, they walked into the boardroom together. Eliza at his side was not just a wife in name, but a force in her own right. The directors shifted uneasily as Adrian's uncle smirked at the end of the table, convinced he had already won. Adrian's voice was calm but edged with steel. You accuse me of corruption, of lies. But today, I bring the truth. He laid out the documents, each page a dagger aimed at his uncle's schemes. Embezzlement, offshore accounts, manipulated contracts, it was all there. Gasps rippled through the room. The directors leaned in, disbelief spreading across their faces. His uncle's smirk faltered. This is fabrication. Eliza stepped forward, her voice cutting clear. No! These are his records, traced and verified. You wanted to humiliate me, to destroy Adrian, but all you have done is reveal your own rot. The room fell silent. One by one, the directors turned their eyes from Adrian to his uncle. The tide had shifted. For the first time, Adrian reached for Eliza's hand in front of them all. It was not a gesture of contract, not a performance for appearances. It was real. His uncle's face flushed with fury, but his power had already begun to crumble. And as the gavel struck to adjourn the meeting, Adrian knew the battle was not over, but the advantage was no longer his uncle's. Walking out of the boardroom, Eliza's hand still in his, Adrian glanced at her. You were right, he said quietly. I do not have to fight this alone. And for the first time, he meant every word. The night after the boardroom clash, the mansion no longer felt like a cold fortress. Adrian and Eliza shared dinner together, not at opposite ends of the long table, but side by side. The meal was simple, but for the first time, the silence between them was not heavy. It was comfortable, filled with quiet glances and the occasional soft laugh. When the dishes were cleared, Adrian led her to the grand gallery that had stood unused for years. Dust had settled on canvases and sculptures, relics of his late mother's passion for art. She wanted this place alive, Adrian said, his voice low. But after she passed, I locked it away. It felt easier to bury her dreams than to face them. Eliza touched one of the covered canvases gently. Dreams do not die because we stop looking at them. They wait for us to be ready. Her words lingered. Adrian watched as she moved through the room, her presence soft yet steady, the way she breathed life into forgotten corners. Something shifted inside him. He had spent years building walls of control and isolation, but she was quietly dismantling them, piece by piece. Later that evening, as rain began to fall against the tall windows, Adrian found himself speaking truths he had never shared. On the balcony overlooking the city, he admitted in a voice almost foreign to himself, I thought marriage was a trap, a chain to control me. But you have made me see it differently. You have made me see myself differently." Eliza looked at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Perhaps that is what happens when two people stop pretending. Contracts end. But honesty, that is where something real begins. For a moment, Adrian could not respond. He simply reached for her hand, not for show, not for duty, but because he wanted to. The storm of lies and schemes outside still raged, but here, under the veil of night, there was peace. Meanwhile, across the city, his uncle seethed in private chambers. The failed ambush at the board meeting had weakened his standing, but he was not finished. He gathered allies, promising them revenge, vowing to destroy Adrian by any means necessary. But in the mansion, Adrian and Eliza no longer felt like strangers bound by ink and signatures. They were beginning to feel like partners, perhaps even more. And though neither dared speak it aloud, both knew that what had begun as the coldest of bargains was turning into the warmest of truths. The contract had brought them together, but choice was keeping them there. And choice, Adrian realized, was far more powerful than obligation. The final confrontation came sooner than either of them expected. Days after the board meeting, Adrian's uncle made one last attempt to strike. He called for an emergency press conference, intending to present new evidence of Adrian's unworthiness. Yet when the cameras switched on, the trap collapsed. Adrian stepped to the podium with Eliza at his side, her presence radiant and unflinching. Instead of defending himself, he revealed the full truth. He presented the documents Eliza had uncovered, exposing years of embezzlement and betrayal by the very man who claimed to protect the company. The room erupted in shock. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed, and within hours the story swept across every major outlet. By the end of the day, Adrian's uncle was stripped of his position and escorted out of the building in disgrace. Justice had landed swiftly and publicly. For the first time in years, Adrian felt the weight on his shoulders lift. But when he looked beside him, he realized the victory was not his alone. It belonged to both of them. That evening, back at the mansion, the atmosphere was different. The cold walls no longer felt like barriers, but like shelter. Adrian led Eliza into the gallery once more, the lights glowing warmly over the polished floors. He stopped in the center of the room, his hands holding a small velvet box. "Eliza," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "We started this as a contract, bound by signatures and expectations. But every day, you have shown me what strength truly looks like. You have given me loyalty without demand, truth without fear, and a heart I never believed I deserved." He opened the box, revealing a ring far more meaningful than the simple band of their arrangement. "This time, there is no contract, no obligation, no board demanding my compliance. This time, it is only me asking you, will you marry me again? For real?" Tears shimmered in Eliza's eyes, but her voice was clear. "Yes, Adrian. 1,000 times, yes." "No." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time since their union began, their kiss was not for cameras, not for appearances, but for themselves. Weeks later, the gallery reopened to the public under a new name, the Warren Cole Foundation for the Arts. On opening night, guests marveled not only at the art but at the story of the couple who had transformed a contract into a partnership built on truth. As the music played and the crowd celebrated, Adrian whispered to Eliza, "The best deal I ever made was you." She smiled, leaning against him. And in that moment, what had begun as an arrangement of necessity ended as a vow of love and choice, proof that sometimes the coldest bargains can lead to the warmest forever.